Hello, everyone. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and I hope you and your family are well and healthy. This is the most bizarre situation I think any of us could have ever imagined. I don't think there's anyone, regardless of how great of an imagination they have, who could have come up with a storyline like what we're experiencing and what the world is experiencing now. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu put an end to this virus and all the very negative ripple effects that all of us are feeling as soon as possible. We all know that this Shabbos is Shabbos Hagadol. There's a long-standing minhag that rabbis would share a Shabbos Hagadol drasha with their communities. And this goes so far back. This year, because of the circumstances we find ourselves in, that's just not going to be the case. I'm not aware of any Shabbos Hagadol, traditional Shabbos Hagadol drasha that's going to be able to take place this year like in years past. I thought what might be a good idea is usually we have a Shabbos Hagadol Shiur. We have a short drasha in the morning at davening, and then in the afternoon before Minhag, we have a shiur. We'll talk about some matters that relate to Pesach and to some Hilchos Pesach. Although we're not going to be able to gather together on Shabbos, I thought we could use this medium to do some learning and to perhaps engage in the learning we would have engaged in had we been able to congregate in shul like in years past. I hope to share some ideas with you that will relate to the situation, the events that we find ourselves in the middle of, and at the same token, relate them to Pesach as well. Everyone should have received in this email a link where they can print out the Mara Mekomos, the source sheets. There should be 6 pages that are there, and I'm going to be working through them with you. So let's jump right in. We titled this A Forgotten Plague-Related Minhag and Pesach of 5780/2020. We're going to talk about a forgotten minhag. Not only is it forgotten, usually forget means we knew about it at some point and then we just can't remember it now because we've been overrun with other information. I think most of us are going to say we never knew about this minhag in the first place. I know I never did. And thank God, because we're going to see that this minhag, this long-standing minhag that Klal Yisrael had, was so related to plagues. And thank God, I don't think any of us have ever lived through a plague or a pandemic before. So that's why this is going to be new to us. So let's jump right in. Just a few weeks ago, I saw the following blurb. This is taken from a Jewish news website. It's called Was is Nayas. So it serves news that's pertinent to the Jewish community, specifically the Orthodox community, but really anything that can be relevant to the Jewish community at all. So here was a blurb that this caught my eye. I thought this is the most bizarre story I ever saw. This was written on March 19th. So this is before there was too much social distancing taking place in much of Israel. So it says as follows. This was taken from Bnei Brak. There's a picture there. It says a strange wedding ceremony took place in the Bnei Brak cemetery this week, with the dead being the majority of those participating in the wedding. Due to government regulations prohibiting gatherings, many weddings have been restricted to small numbers of participants, and possibly the families thought that in a cemetery they could conduct a larger ceremony without interference by authorities, or maybe they wanted the grandparents to attend. So whoever is writing this is writing it. It's a little bit of sarcasm. You can clearly see that there. He's saying that the most bizarre thing, I never saw something like this before. Well, what on earth is going on? They're conducting a wedding in a cemetery? What could have motivated them? Perhaps it was to get away from the authorities who wanted to limit the size of the crowd, or maybe this idea they wanted the grandparents. What is this? Now, all of a sudden you look at, that was the way I saw the article originally, just that first paragraph. Then you look at the comments, and the comments, one of the first comments there is, by someone who calls themselves Rabbi COVID-19. He says, if you're ignorant in your own minhagim, please don't show that in public. It's a very old custom to make a wedding for 2 Yisomim in the cemetery, Yisomim means orphans, to stop the plague. It's called a Schwarze Chasana, which would literally mean a black wedding, meaning a wedding which is normally such a happy event. There's this black cloud of doom and gloom that's hanging over it. Never heard of such a thing before. And then the immediate comment after that was from the writer of the article. Thanks for your input. I was ignorant of this minhag, never having experienced the plague, Baruch Hashem. I will add to this article. And then that's the next paragraph. You see what the author of that article, what they added. This is an appendix to that, to what was above. And here's what they say. However, it is also possible that a cemetery wedding is an ancient rite used to ward off plagues. 2 orphans would be married in a cemetery in a wedding known as a Schwarze Chasna, which means a black wedding. Remember, Schwarz in Yiddish is Schwartz. The last name Schwartz means black. And there was different reasons why someone may have earned the nickname or the last name, the surname Schwartz. It could be they worked in the coal mines, whatever it was, that they were coming home, they were in the ink factories, whatever it was, that they were always coming home dark or black. So they earned the last name Schwartz. Schwartz means that. So with Schwarz Chasna would mean a black wedding. Again, the word Schwartz has taken on terrible connotations, and almost you might say racial connotations, and it's a word that we need to be very careful not to use in the wrong context, and definitely not to put anybody else down. So it's something just to be alert ourselves. We need to be careful in getting that out of our vocabulary because of the connotations it's taken on. But in this connotations, it just means a Schwarze Chasna, just means a black wedding. And this was considered an amulet against plagues. The Jews pledged to support the orphans, and in return, they hoped the souls of the deceased would reward their efforts and intercede to block the evil decree. I'd never heard of such a thing before. The Schwarze Chasna, and that such a minhag existed, and that Klal Yisrael felt the need to resort to this at different points in Jewish history. I had some time last Shabbos. We all had time last Shabbos. We were home. We were alone. We didn't have shul. We couldn't interact with neighbors and friends. So I did a lot of reading. And I want to tell you about an article that came my way on Friday of last week. This article was written by, it was a Dvar Torah and an article that was written by Rabbi Korobkin. You see a blurb of him on the bottom of page 1, as well as a picture. Rabbi Korobkin is the senior rabbi of Beth Avram Yosef of Toronto congregation. It's known as the Bayit. That's up north, they always say, in Toronto, the Thornhill area, and current president of the RCA, Rabbinical Council of America. Rabbi Korobkin is a wonderful person, such a warm individual. He's a Talmud Chacham. He's a Musmach of Yeshivas Ner Yisrael in Baltimore. His first pulpit, I believe he had, was in Allentown, Pennsylvania. By the time Layla and I were in Pennsylvania, he was no longer there. He was running a kehillah in Los Angeles. And a number of years ago, he moved up to Toronto, where he became the senior rabbi at the Bayit. Very, very large congregation up in Toronto. A wonderful person, a very humble man, and a big Talmud Chacham as well. Let me tell you a little bit about this Dvar Torah that he sent out last Friday. Last Friday, he described his emotions as a father. His son, he has a son who was married the previous week in Los Angeles, and he was not able to attend. He and his wife were not able to attend due to the fact the only way they could have gotten to the wedding would have been to get on an airplane. They were strongly advised not to attend their own son's wedding. And their son was married in California and was just surrounded by a minyan of very close relatives that live right there and some immediate friends, but his own parents weren't there. And he was describing in his Dvar Torah to his shul what that felt like as a father and as for his wife, as a mother, not to be at their own son's wedding. And in the midst of his Dvar Torah, he brought to my attention an article that was written just a few months ago in February by a Dr. Jeremy Brown. You'll see that it's on page 2. There's a link there. If you want to read the entire article, you could just click on that link as well. So let's just read some of this article. I had never heard of this before, but Rabbi Korobkin wanted to fill in the blanks of this idea, this minhag of the Schwarze Chasna, and he found this article by Dr. Jeremy Brown, who did a lot of homework on this, and Rabbi Korobkin took it further because he actually found the sources and told me where I could find the sources to hunt them down in the original. So let's see. A long-forgotten Jewish remedy for the coronavirus outbreak by Jeremy Brown. The news of the spreading new coronavirus is worrying. This is written back in February. Borders have been closed, flights canceled, and travelers from China quarantined. Currently, the best medical advice is the same we have given for decades to combat seasonal influenza. Cover your face when you sneeze, wash your hands, and stay at home if you don't feel well. In the last century, there was, however, a particularly Jewish response to a life-threatening epidemic. It was known in Yiddish as the Schwarze Chasna, the Black Wedding, and took place in response to terrible waves of cholera, typhus, and influenza that ravaged the Jews of Eastern Europe, Israel, and North America. The ceremony was simple. A man and woman, each unmarried and either impoverished, orphaned, or disabled, sometimes all three, were married together as husband and wife under a chuppah in a cemetery. The couple's new home was established with donations by the community. With this act of group chesed, it was hoped that the plague would be averted. Never heard. Amazing. What a response. What a Jewish response. There's a plague. We have no idea what to do about this. And again, even we could say they didn't have modern science. Even today with modern science, we don't know what to do about this. So what did people do? They would say, we're going to grab two Yisomim, the two most vulnerable members of our community, and we're going to do an unbelievable act of chesed. We'll bring them together so they can build a Bayis Neman B'Yisrael. They don't have the funds to do this. No one's looking out for them. They don't have parents. But we're going to do this as a community, and we're going to bring them together, and it's going to take place in the cemetery. So the Zechusim, all of those righteous souls who are married here, will be witness to the Zechusim. They'll take it up Lamala, they'll take it up to the heavens to sing before HaKadosh Baruch Hu of the chesed that Klal Yisrael is doing, and hopefully that'll put an end to this Magef, put an end to the plague. I'd never heard it. What a beautiful idea. Now look at some of the sources that are mentioned in this article that Rabbi Korobkin hunted down and sent them, and that's how I was able to find the original. So here's something from Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk. Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk is one of the early Hasidic masters. And you see here his dates, 1717 to 1787. And he was very well known for his work, the Noam Elimelech, a Hasidic sefer. And this is a sefer that was written about him by some of his Talmidim called Oel Elimelech. And they bring down this incident that occurs in the late 1700s. And it's talking about at a time that there was a Magefa, there was a plague that was ravaging the area. And look how the Noam Elimelech, how Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk dealt with it. So here's just a brief paragraph. He says, "Erev Shabbos Kodesh ba'ish kafri sheyesh lo bas lamed vav shanim." So it was on an Erev Shabbos, it was a Friday, that a villager, a poor villager, came and approached the Noam Elimelech, this Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk, and this villager had a daughter who was 36 years old. But he had no money. This fellow was broke. So he had no way to marry off this daughter. And he couldn't find a suitor for her. But the Noam Elimelech knows about the fact that there is this segula, there's this long-standing custom that Klal Yisrael had turned to. Again, I don't know how early it goes back or earlier sources. This is the earliest one that I found. And that he says that there was this long-standing custom that at a time of plague, we got to do an unbelievable act of chesed for Yisomim. So the Noam Elimelech knows about this. What did he do? Tziva Rav Elimelech, Lavia Vasia. He says, bring the daughter, and we're going to marry her off now because there's a plague going on. I want to help you, and it's got to be now. Im Havasser Traeger. With this poor water schlepper. Remember, there was no running water, so people would have to go to a well, and then with the pole over their shoulders, a bucket at each end, they would schlep water to people's homes and get paid pennies for this. So he goes, I'm going to marry your 36-year-old daughter off to the Wasserträger, to the local water schlepper, Shalom ben Shloshim, who's 30 years old. It's okay, there'll be an age difference, but let's make a shidduch. The Asa Nesuin, the Noam Elimelech served as the Mesader Kedushin. He says, we're going to marry them off. Hamagid Mikojnitz Haya Tofes Kinor. So the Magid of Kojnitz, again, one of the early Hasidic Rebbes, he was there at the wedding too, and he played the harp. He was playing a musical instrument. He wanted to liven it up. Rebbe Milublin Haya Habadchem. And the Rebbe of the Chozel of Lublin, he was there too at this wedding, and he served as a Badchem. Badchem was like the jester, someone who did shtick and did wedding shtick, did whatever he could to bring smiles to people's faces. Now, nowhere in this episode here does it say it took place in the cemetery. But you do see in this episode that there was a very Jewish response. That when we were faced with a choli, they were faced with a plague, they said, we've got to do an unbelievable act of chesed, and who could be a more deserving recipient of act of chesed as the most vulnerable in our community, Yisomim, or the downtrodden, the broke, and what can we do? Let's marry them off, and let's make a joyous event out of this, and hopefully that'll serve as a zechus for our community that Hashem should pull back with this plague. Fascinating. Let's go to page 3. Here's another account from 1865. This is from a sefer called Shara Yerushalayim. And earlier in this piece, they're describing terrible, terrible events that were taking place in the Jewish communities that were in Israel that year. They were suffering an incredible amount of locust coming through, was ruining everybody's crops, was ruining everybody's livelihood, and was also spreading disease. So there's terrible disease that's breaking out, 1865, all over Israel. And look what the Jewish community this is up north, what they do in response. So he says, V'achar Chag Pesach. So it was after Pesach that year. Hischal Hadever ba'am Alexandria. So now there's a terrible plague that starts in Alexandria in Egypt. Shal Mitzrayim, Asher Hir Gedola Ma'od, Umesu B'chol Yom Ke'elef Nefashos. Every day there was 1,000 people approximately who are dying. Ad Shenogab Yerushalayim, and the plague makes its way to Israel, makes its way to Jerusalem, and Misham Lasvivos, and all around the surrounding areas of Tveria and Tzfat. It makes its way up north into Israel as well. The Lachu Rashi Ira Kadosha Tzfat. So what did the elders And the leadership, the Jewish communal leadership in Tzfat too, they gathered together Yisomim, they gathered together orphans, Yisomos, so orphan boys and orphan girls, they see Osam, and they decide we're going to marry them off. We need Zechusim. What greater Zechusim could there be right now than looking after the most vulnerable? We're going to marry them off. And they made the chuppahs where? In the cemetery. Bein Rabbeinu Arizal, in the area where the Arizal, the holy Arizal was buried, Ubein Rabbeinu Maran Beis HaYosef, and Rabbi Yosef Cairo. So near their spots in the cemetery, that's where they're marrying. They're making these chuppahs. They're amazing. Ki Kabbalah biyadam, because they had a long-standing tradition as a segula. They had a segula v'todos lekel asher nach mehem v'sar hamavas hazeh acharav shel b'tzores halach v'chazak v'chol yomam shnefush nefu. So he says, thank God the plague was averted. It seems like it had pulled back. And however, there still was great hunger and great devastation, but it seems like the dying seems to have stopped. That's what they're reporting in 1865 in northern Israel. So again, here you see a clear indication that there was this long-standing custom, and that's what the elders of Tzfat did when they felt that the plague was getting there. Now you have just about the following year. This is from 1866. This is from a sefer called Zichronos Rishonim. So this was an account written about just how hard it was and how people struggled to try to live as Jews in Yerushalayim in that period. So he says, B'shnas Tafresh Chavav, so again, that's about 1866 or so. There was a terrible cholera epidemic that had broken out in Jerusalem. And as to act as a merit, as some type of zechus to end this plague, so what did they do? They set up chuppahs to marry people off in the cemetery and Har Zeisim on the Mount of Olives. Now here he doesn't say it was Yisomim. He just kind of nonchalantly says it was this was the segula they had. And I think we could assume from all the other episodes in there that they were looking for people who were vulnerable. If they weren't Yisomim, maybe they were impoverished people. Whoever it was, that's how the Jewish community responded, with massive chesed. If they were faced with an incredible amount of Magefa plague, what do we say what could possibly stop that? Was some gavaldik, some incredible amount of chesed. And what greater chesed could there be than helping two Jewish unfortunate individuals get together and form a Bayis Neman B'Yisrael, a Jewish household together. And he gives the names. This is again, no way to look them up who they were. This is 1866. Shel Rabbi Yosef Lutziner, and he says Denker, Ve'ishto and his wife. So Mr. and Mrs. Yosef Lutziner. That's who this was. And this event, there was a lot of people who crowded around to be part of this, and there was great simcha. So this is similar to what we saw in the Noam Elimelech, that he and his fellow Hasidic heads, greats, they wanted to be Mesameach and to play the harp and be the Badchan and be personally involved. That's what you're saying here as well. There was incredible simcha. Okay, let's go back to the article that we started with from Dr. Jeremy Brown. That's on the bottom of page 3. He gives a more modern account from a little over 100 years ago here in the United States of America. Look at this. I tried finding this online. I just didn't have access to the website that would allow you to get the newspaper from this period, but I'm sure at university libraries we could easily get this. So it says here, for example, one such ceremony, he's talking about how recently here in the United States something like this took place. So he says, for example, one such ceremony took place 101 years ago as the Jews of Philadelphia gathered in a cemetery with the goal of defeating the deadly influenza outbreak. By the time it was finally over, the great flu pandemic of 1919 claimed 50 to 100 million lives worldwide. In the US, over 670,000 people died, and the dead were piling up in the city of Philadelphia. And so the Jews there celebrated a black wedding. They made a Schwarze Chasna. According to newspaper reports, and he quotes where, he says it was the Public Ledger of Philadelphia, and it was on October 21st, 1918, this was printed. I would love to see the original. It says, according to newspaper reports, they chose Fanny Jacobs and Harold Rosenberg. So again, here's their names, as the bride and groom. The two were married at the first line of graves in the Jewish cemetery near Cobb's Creek at 3 p.m. on Friday, October 25th, 1918. Now again, I don't know how this was printed on October 21st. If this is when it happened, again, there might be something wrong with the dates here. More than 1,000 Jews watched as Rabbi Lipschitz officiated at the chuppah. And when amid their stark surroundings, the report continued, The couple were pronounced man and wife. The Orthodox among the spectators filed solemnly past the couple, made them presents of money in sums from 10 cents to $100, according to the means and circumstances of the donor, until more than $1,000 had been given. In 1918, $1,000 is some serious money. And that's how they're starting this couple off. We made them a chuppah in the cemetery, this unfortunate couple, and we're going to give them the funds they need to get started to build a Bayis Ne'eman B'Yisrael. The Jewish community had chosen this intervention so that the attention of God would be called to the affliction of their fellows, and the most humble man and woman among them should join in marriage in the presence of the dead. Amazing. One more account. For also, this is just a little bit later. This is from November 11th, 1918, and here I was able to find a copy of the original paper online. This was in Winnipeg, in Canada, from the Winnipeg Evening Tribune, Monday, November 11th, 1918. It's very short. Let's just read this together. I'm sorry, the print's a little bit tough. This is what I was able to find. Here's the headline. Hebrews hold wedding of death to halt flu. Ceremony of 2,000 years ago observed in East Kildonan Cemetery. The wedding of death, an ancient Hebrew ceremony established about 2,000 years ago to stay the ravages of a plague, was celebrated at East Kildonan Cemetery this afternoon as a sacrifice to stay the flu epidemic. Again, they're trying to wonder what's going on. Whoever's writing this article, they probably had some limited information as to what this minhag was about. They're using terminology that again, isn't what we would use. Hebrews and Gentiles alike were present to witness the ceremony. It was the first wedding under the old Orthodox religion ever staged in Canada, it was claimed. Prohibited at all other times, the ceremony was held at the orders of Rabbi Kahanovich and Goradsky. The wedding was most elaborate and had been planned for more than a month. At one end of the cemetery, a quorum of 10 Jews conducted a funeral. At the other, 1,000 Gentiles and Jews witnessed a wedding. The ancient Jewish song of life was played. Not sure what that was. If it was Od Yishama, I don't know. On the west side of the cemetery, at the same time, Jews were chanting the wail of death as a body was committed to the grave. Harry Fleckman and Dora Weisman were the contracting parties at the wedding. Rabbis Kanovich and Goradsky officiated. Following the ceremonies, services were conducted by the rabbis. Ancient Jewish chapters reserved for these ceremonies were chanted by the rabbis and so repeated by all Jews present as the wedding processions marched out of the cemetery. Fascinating. So here we have all these indications of a minhag that once existed. The Schwarze Chasana, this black wedding, was a way to take people, the most unfortunate in our community, shower them with an unbelievable amount of chesed in the cemetery, hoping that that zechus of what we as a community, what that Jewish community had done, would be taken on high by the neshamas who were laying at rest in that cemetery, and they would plead on behalf of Klal Yisrael and put an end to a plague. What an amazing minhag that, again, none of us, thank God, had ever lived through a plague, so we never saw something like this. But what an amazing minhag, again, just to think about what went into this, the mindset, the psychology of this really shows us of the value that was placed on chesed. That when we're looking to see what can we do to put an end to such hardship, to try to say, well, what chesed is possible under the given circumstances, what fantastic act of chesed can be done. But again, the question remains, why in the cemetery? So again, from all the sources we saw, it seems that it's a zechus. We want this to be witnessed by the neshamas that are resting in the cemetery near their bodies that once hosted them, and they should take this report up to Shamayim, and Hashem should end this gezerah, should end the decree that he's brought destruction on his community with a plague. That seems to be a simple answer. Rabbi Korobkin, when he shared this in his Devar Torah with his shul last week, he wanted to suggest another idea as well. Perhaps there's another thought as to why this took place in a cemetery. Whenever we go to a cemetery, I know I've had this feeling, I've spoken with others who have experienced this as well. Sometimes when we go to a cemetery, it's a very sobering feeling because we look around and we see matzevas of people. And each one of those matzevas represented a person who hopefully lived a full life and was active in their community, played a role that was important. Whatever it was, they were instrumental in people's lives. And probably each and every one of those people could not imagine, if I were not here, how could this world possibly go on? How could my community possibly continue to function without me? How could my family possibly continue to function without me? I think that's a thought that every living human being has at some points in their life. Yet when we go visit a cemetery, we're confronted with matzevas, we're confronted with gravestones of people who had that same thought, and yet here we are. We're years later, and our world is still turning. The engines of our universe are still moving. Everything is still working. What happened to all those thoughts about how important the person was and the crucial role that they played in the ongoing nature of our world and our existence? It's a sobering thought because it makes each and every one of us realize when we visit a cemetery that I may not be as important as I think I am. I may not play this crucial role in God's plan that I think I can, that I do. And you know what? If I'm not here somehow or another, this world is going to keep on going. People will find a way to compensate, and it'll just keep on going without me. That's a very sobering thought that I think all of us are confronted with when we hit a cemetery. Rabbi Korobkin was suggesting perhaps another reason why Jewish communities felt that this idea of the Schwarze Chasna should take place in a cemetery is to bring everyone to that realization, to bring everyone to that sobering reality that I'm not as important as I think I am. When we visit a cemetery, it's a reality check that this world can just keep going even if I'm not here. That can really be a catalyst for tshuva, of real introspection, to get all of us, to get everyone who's present at one of those weddings to think, how am I going to change? How am I going to be different from this point moving forward? Very, very nice idea. That could very well be how this custom that's really shrouded in mystery, how this custom came to be. So be that as it may, we've now become aware of this custom, the Schwarze Chasana, the black wedding that was performed by Jewish communities around the world at very different locales and very different points in history as what they saw as a segula, as some way to assuage the wrath of a plague, as some way to beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Achmanos, for mercy, when they just did not see any way out of the terrible position they were in. We say, we're going to shower such people with chesed. Let's come back to that in a minute. What I want to do now is focus on a different point. So many of us are feeling, as Pesach approaches, so many of us are feeling that this just isn't the same Pesach that I was expecting. A couple of weeks ago, had you asked us what was the Pesach we were expecting, we would have described the scene around our table, family, friends, from far, from near, who are going to be joining us. And this year, because we care so much about the most vulnerable in our communities, we've limited that. We've asked our relatives and friends who were supposed to come from far, we've asked them not to come. They're staying put. I know Layla and I, we would love to have spent Pesach. My parents were supposed to join us. We would have loved to have them with us. But they can't come, sadly, because of this situation. They're going to have Pesach by themselves in Cleveland. We'll have Pesach by ourselves here in Memphis. And that's not the Pesach that we envision. But what's keeping us positive is because we realize that we're doing this because we want to help others. We want to look out for those who are less fortunate, those who are most vulnerable, and say, what can we do to stop the spread of this virus? And all our medical professionals are telling us that we want to avoid cross-pollination, bringing people from different locales together, which could introduce this virus into communities, and then people bring it back with them, wherever it is, where it has not yet run its course. We're trying our best that we can to slow things down until our medical establishment is able to deal with this properly. And this is part of that. We're looking out for people. So that's what's keeping us positive. Everyone has to look for something to keep them positive during a time like this. But I want to share something else. If I told this to Rabbi Korobkin after I had read his Devar Torah, I said, reading your Devar Torah and your experience about missing your kid's wedding and then thinking about how this fits with coronavirus, this really reminded me of a Rashi towards the end of Sefer Bereshis. So let's look at page 5 together. It's page 5. This is Parak Mem Gimel in Sefer Bereshis. This is after Yosef has been playing with his brothers. They came down to Mitzrayim looking for food to bring back to Eretz Yisrael to their families. Yosef was not recognized as Yosef. They thought he was this viceroy, and he's playing with them. And again, all the Mefarshim explained different motivations, what he had, or he was testing them to see if they really were remorseful for what they had done to him years earlier, all sorts of different explanations. But finally what he said to them was, I'm not going to let Levi out until, I'm not going to send everyone back until, Shimon rather. I'm not going to send Shimon back and let him out of prison until you bring down this last brother of yours that you tell me exists, which was Binyamin. So finally he meets Binyamin. So let's see what happens. The Pasuk tells us, and again, Yosef has not revealed himself yet. It says, Vayisayna vayar. So he lifts his eyes and he sees his Binyamin Achiv ben Imo. He sees his brother Binyamin, who's his full brother. They share both a father and a mother. Is this that young brother of yours that you told me about? Vayomar Elokim yechancha b'nei. And he says, God should shower all sorts of favor and grace upon you. That's what Yosef says. So it says Yosef had to be very quick because his rachmanis, his feelings of mercy, were stirred El Achiv to his brother. He felt the need to cry. But he didn't want to cry in front of the brothers because that would give away his identity. So he leaves the room to go outside, and that's where he can cry. So he wants to hide the fact that he was just bawling and that he was just crying. So he washes his face with water to erase any type of indication that he had just had this cry. And he came out, he restrained himself again, and he said, no, let's set up food. We're going to serve them lunch. So the question is, what happened? What triggered Yosef? What made him cry? And Rashi here quotes a fascinating Gemara in Masechah Sota. Let's read Rashi together. And I told Rabbi Korobkin, I said, reading your Dvar Torah, what you experienced, and thinking more about the coronavirus, what so many other families are experiencing, it really brought me back to this Rashi. Let's read it together. Rashi says, Kinim Rachamav, is that Yosef had to leave because his mercy got all stirred, his emotions, his passions got all stirred up, and he was about to start crying. No, why? What happened? Shalu yesh lecha ach me'em. The Gemara tells us Yosef asked Binyamin, again, Binyamin doesn't know this is Yosef. He asks Binyamin, tell me, do you have a brother that you share a mother with? Amar lo, ach hayoli, ve'eni yodea hechanu. So Binyamin says, yeah, Nebuch, I have a brother. I had this brother, my big brother Yosef. I don't know whatever happened to him. So then Yosef asks him, yesh lecha banim, do you have any kids? Amar lo, yesh li asara. So he says, in fact, I have 10. Amar lo, mashamam. So Yosef says to Binyamin, tell me, what are their names? So Amar lo, he tells him all the names. And those names appear later in Sefer Bereshis when it goes through all the names, the Boy Mitzrayim, everyone who came down to Egypt. Bela, Becher, he gives them all the names. So Amar lo, mativan shal shem oselu. So Yosef says, explain those names to me. Those aren't traditional names. It's not like Steve and Michael. What are those names? I don't recognize those names. What do they mean? What do they indicate? What's the deeper meaning? So Amar lo, so Binyamin says, Kulam al shem achi v'hatzaros asher metzau. All of these names are allusions to my long-lost older brother and all of the tsaros, all of the hard experiences and the troubles and the travails that he has had. He must have had a nevuah about what had happened, some type of divine inspiration, what had happened to Yosef, and that inspires him to name his kids. So now it goes through them. What was Pshat? What was the meaning behind the 10 names of Binyamin's kids? Bela, I bolded these because these are the ones that really struck me. Bela, why did he name his first kid Bela? Shenivla beina umos, because he said, I had a brother who was swallowed up. He was lost. I see he was swallowed up amongst the nations of the world. Becher, why do I have a son named Becher? Shoya Bechor Limi. This is to remember that big brother of mine. He was the Bechor to my mother. Eshbael, why did I name one of my kids Ashbel? So it says, because Shishavu Kel, because God put my brother into captivity. Gera, why did I name another one of my sons Gera? Sheniskayer Bachsanya, because he was a stranger in these rinky-dink motels, these little lodging places. Nebuch, my brother, and he's finding himself having to put a roof over his head in these terrible places. No one wants to stay. The Naaman, why did I name my next kid Naaman? So he says, Shaya Naim Yoser, because my brother was so Naim, he was so pleasant. Achi Verosh, why do I have one son named Achi and another named Rosh? So he says, Achi Haya, Veroshi Haya, because he was my dear brother, and Roshi, he was my superior. I always looked up to him. Mupim, why do I have a son, number 8, who was named Mupim? So he says, Mipi Aviv Lamad, because he had the great zechus of learning from my father, from Yaakov. Chupim, why do I have another son named Chupim? Shelo Ra'ah Chupasi, because it breaks my heart that Yosef didn't see my chuppah, he didn't see my marriage canopy, V'lo Risi Ani Chupaso. And I was never able to see his marriage. To have brothers who love each other so much, who are so close, and not to have been at each other's chuppah breaks my heart. And then he says, Va'ard, why do I have a son named Ard? She Yarad Levein Umos. That was number 10. Why Ard? Because he was Yarad, because he went down. He was, this kind of like Bela, that he was swallowed up by nations. He went down to be amongst all the nations out there. The Gemara talks about this in Sota. Miyad nichmeru rachmav, and that's what aroused Yosef's emotions and what stirred him up and why he started crying. What struck me about this Rashi is as follows. Number one, what Rabbi Korobkin was experiencing, those deep feelings as a father and his wife as a mother, not being at the chuppah of their son. Oy, wow, can you imagine how hard that is? You know, I give them such a yasher koach that they encourage the couple to go through with it, go through with the wedding. And that's what everyone's encouraging all the couples at this time to do. Go through with the wedding, even though your dear parents can't be there. But do you know what kind of what kind of a stab in the heart that is for the parents? They raise this child, they love him. It's starting back from his youngest days as a baby, everything they did to nurture him, and to know that he got married and they were not there at his chuppah. And for the child to know that the parents weren't at the chuppah. It's heartbreaking. In a certain sense, that just puts into context any kind of feelings we might have about this Pesach being a little bit different, about the facts that our loved ones and our relatives can't join us for our Seder. Yes, it's not enjoyable. It's tough. But there are people out there who are dealing with so much worse. Could you imagine that, of not being at the chuppah? But more than that, I spoke to my brother-in-law. Layla has a brother, Yossi, who lives in New York, in Queens. He's a social worker. I spoke to him last Friday, and he told me something that I hadn't thought about much until that point. He said, if you're following the news out of New York, and all of us, it's so accessible, you can see this, the hospitals in New York and New Jersey are just filled. They're overrun with people who are suffering terribly from coronavirus. And the Jewish communities are being hit so hard as well. My mother-in-law told us last Shabbos in Brooklyn, she just heard Hatzalah ambulances, the whole Shabbos, picking people up and taking them to the hospitals. But you know what happens when people are sending a loved one to the hospital? They stand at the door and they wave goodbye. They can't join them in that ambulance. They can't join them in the hospital. You know what kind of torture that is for family members, knowing that they've got someone who's so sick that they can't look after them at home, has to be taken to the hospital, but they can't be there at their bedside. They can't advocate for them, sending them to a hospital that's filled with horribly sick people, and with the doctors and nurses who are working so heroically under these conditions. And God bless them for everything they're doing, all of our healthcare professionals. They're working so heroically under these conditions, but they're overtasked, they're overworked. They can't answer the phones and call the families and give constant updates. They don't have the ability to do this. So the families are waving, saying goodbye to a loved one taken to the hospital, and they're home tortured, not knowing what's going on with their loved ones. My brother-in-law, a social worker, he said this is trauma. He's speaking to people. He's dealing with people who are going through trauma. That's how he described it. Even though they're safe and they're healthy, the trauma they're feeling of not being able to look after the relative, not being aware of what's going on with their loved one, that's killing them. And that also struck me. That's what Rashi's saying here. That's what Binyamin, why he named his kids Bella. What was Bella? Shenivla Beina Umos. My beloved brother was swallowed up. I lost touch with him. I don't know what's going on with him. It kills me. And that's why I named my son that. Eshbael Sheshavu Kael. He was taken prisoner. God sent him away, and I lost contact. That's why I named him. Gay Russian is Gayer Bachsanya. He's in a place, he's in some rinky-dink hotel no one wants to be. All these people who have relatives who are in hospitals, that's not where they want to be. How does that make the loved one feel who's back at home? That's torture. That's the trauma that my brother-in-law was talking about. And it's that type of trauma that's miyad nichmeru Rachamav. That's what brought Yosef to tears. And that's what should bring us to tears. Yes, we are going through inconveniences this Pesach. 100% they're inconveniences. But what we should be bringing us to tears is thinking about people who are dying. People who are dying and people who are horribly sick in so many communities around the country whose families are tortured because they don't know what is the current status of their loved one. That's something to cry about. Baruch Hashem, for all of us who are healthy, for all of us who are well and we're safe, and God willing, it should stay that way. But let's keep things in perspective. Yes, we're going to be going through some inconveniences this Pesach, and this certainly is not going to be the Pesach that we dreamed of, and some food items we might be missing. 100%, those are inconveniences. But my God, let's keep everything in perspective. There are things that should bring us to tears, and that's what Rashi's telling us. Missing a chuppah, and missing such a happy event, missing of a loved one, of a son, of a child, of a daughter, or these other events of having a loved one being swallowed up and not knowing what's going on with them, that should be bringing people to tears. The other items that we're suffering, let's keep it in perspective that those are inconveniences. Again, not to belittle them, they're inconveniences, but let's try to keep things in perspective. And I think that will help each and every one of us deal with those inconveniences. Let's just go to the last page, page 6. So here's what I wrote to Rabbi Korobkin Motzei Shabbos this past week, because I spent a lot of time on Shabbos looking through some of these sources about the Shvartz Chasana, and this Rashi made such an impression on me. So here's what I just shot him an email, Motzei Shabbos. I said, a good vach, Rabbi Korobkin, I hope you're well. Mazel tov on your son's wedding. May you and your wife enjoy much nachas from your new couple. So sorry you missed their wedding. Over Shabbos, I realized how that relates to the end of the first Rashi, the Bereshis Mem Gimel Lamed. That's the Rashi we just did. Thanks so much for sharing your Dvar Torah an article where you provided exact footnotes to track down the sources in the Svarim. And that's how I was able to find these exact sources, because Baruch Hashem, Rabbi Korobkin gave me that. He didn't just say, it says it in the Sefer somewhere. He gave me exact source and what page. I think I'll try to share this with my shul next week, and here we are. Have a good night and hang in there, Akiva Mails. So he wrote back to me the next morning on Sunday. And I know Rabbi Korobkin over the years. I've worked with him on different committees, either at the RCA or I've met him at different conferences, different conventions. He's such a mensch, a Talmud Chacham. He's a good man. So he says, dear Rabbi Akiva, thank you so much for your beautiful email and your generous blessings. We truly are besimcha because our son is married, and we appreciate this special divine gift and all the silver linings. We hope to celebrate later in the summer when this is all in our rearview mirrors. It's so meaningful to Karen and me, that's his wife, that you and so many others have reached out to us to offer your blessings. May Hashem bless you and your family with smachot, yeshuot, v'nechamot. Thank you for sharing with your kehillah warmly, Daniel. And that was how he ended it. And again, I thought this was so inspiring of him, how he's dealing with this. Rather than being all upset and hitting his head against the wall about missing the chuppah, he's staying positive. If he could stay positive, I think all of us who are experiencing a Pesach that we didn't want to experience and has its inconveniences, I think we can stay positive as well. Let me share one last point with you, and that's the last item on page 6. This idea, getting back to the Shvartz Chasana, the way that Klal Yisrael developed this minhag is they said, if we're faced with a magefa, we're faced with a plague, what can we possibly do to calm the wrath of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to take this magefa away for us is to get engaged in unbelievable acts of chesed. And who do we look for? Look for the most downtrodden, look for the most vulnerable, the weakest link in our chain, in our community, and let's shower them with unbelievable chesed, and that'll be the zechus for us. That's what they did with the Shvartz Chasana. What are we doing? Right now, what opportunities are there for us? So number one, I would say as follows. By keeping to all the restrictions that our healthcare professionals are asking us to keep to, and our national Jewish organizations, they're getting their guidance from the leaders in the world of infectious disease. I spoke last week to leaders both at 3 organizations, at the OU, at Aguda, and at the RCA, and they all said, we're all on the same conference call. We're getting our instructions and our recommendations from the same body of the nation's leading infectious disease experts. And this is what they're recommending. So if we follow those instructions, what are we doing? We are looking out for the most vulnerable in our community. We're looking out for the aged who are most susceptible to this virus. We're looking out for those who have compromised immune systems. They also are the most susceptible for this. This is our own Shvartz Chasana in a sense. We're doing something by looking out for them. We are making a sacrifice. Okay, as ridiculous it is to call this a sacrifice, by staying put, by having a lonely Seder, we are sacrificing in order to help the most vulnerable in our community. In a certain sense, that's a Shvartz Chasana. That's making a black wedding for those who are most vulnerable. What greater gift can we give people than Chayim, than to give them life and to help protect them from the ravages of a terrible virus? That, in a sense, is something else we can do. But maybe we could even do a little bit more. I've told you this in the past, and I'll end with this. A number of years ago, Layla and I got to know a sweet family, the most beautiful children. And these children, without going into specifics, they lost both of their parents through illness. They first lost their father and then they lost their mother. Sweetest children that you could ever imagine in the world. Sweetest, sweetest children. They were full-blown Yisomim. And I remember when one of the children, he was a boy, when he had his bar mitzvah, the family had gone to live with relatives in New York. Layla and I made an effort. We're going to be at that boy's bar mitzvah party because he's nebuch. He doesn't have a father or mother to celebrate with him. So we made the trip into New York from Pennsylvania. We were at that bar mitzvah, and it was such a beautiful bar mitzvah. There was such simcha. It was everyone there just wanted to shower simcha and good feelings on this bar mitzvah boy and on his siblings. There was such feelings, powerful feelings of joy. And the boy's grandfather came over to me at the bar mitzvah and gave me a big hug. And he said to me, he says, I am so happy that you are here. And I told him, I said, I'm so happy to be here. He told me, he goes, you are emulating HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I said, what do you mean? He says, you say it every day in davening. And I kind of got embarrassed. I said, explain yourself. He's saying the first Hallelujah, and this is what I have the last item on page 6. It's in Tehillim. It's Kuf Mem Vav. It's Psalm 146. It ends with the following idea. We say about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem shomer es gerim, Hashem looks after strangers. The Mefarshim say it's not limited to gerim. It's not just talking about converts. It's talking about all the downtrodden, anybody who is vulnerable and weak. Hashem is shomer es gerim. Hashem looks after everybody who, that's what Hashem does. That's his calling card. That's how he identifies himself. And then it says more, Yasom v'almana yoded. Hashem goes out of his way to give encouragement. Yoded means he encourages the Yasom and the almana. He goes out of his way to encourage the orphan and the widow. And he says, you're emulating HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We say about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yasom v'almana yoded, and you're here. You made a trip. You and your wife came to be at this bar mitzvah. You are emulating Hashem. You are giving encouragement, and you're lifting the spirits of a bar mitzvah boy who's a Yasom. It's so beautiful. You're emulating HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I walked away with two ideas from this. Is that, I thank the grandfather so much, the Zayda, for sharing that with me. But also I said, oh my God, how's it possible that I'm this old and I've said that Hallelujah this many times in my life, and I don't think I ever knew what that meant. I don't think I ever looked up to see what was just the Perush HaMilim. What was the words meaning when I said Yasom v'almana yoded? I was flabbergasted. My God, he was throwing out this pasuk from Tehillim at me, and I never looked it up. So I said, oh my God, I really have to learn just the plain explanation of the words of tefillah. I can't believe that. That was point number one. But point number two is, all of our Sfarim tell us that we want to emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'alachta b'drachav means we should walk in God's ways. Walking in God's ways means we want to find what are his midos, what are the attributes of Hashem, and how can I emulate them? And Chazal tell us, Mahu rachum avatah rachum. He's got rachamim, he's got mercy. We should try to embolden ourselves, our feelings of mercy. If we want to have chanun, we want to have grace, how we deal with others, because that's what Hashem is. All the positive acts that we can find throughout Tanakh and throughout Chazal that HaKadosh Baruch Hu engages in, that's what we want to do. So here we see another, Yasom v'almana yoded. Hashem looks after, Hashem takes a personal interest in Yasomim and Almanos. So that's what we want to do. That's what we would aspire to. That's the basis of this minhag of the Schwarze Chasna, that black wedding, was to say, in the midst of this blackness, this cloud of damper, of destruction and plague that's around us, what can we do to emulate God? Who can we shower with chesed, who needs it most? And that's how they would say, let's find Yisomim and Yisomos, let's find orphans, let's find downtrodden, let's find the poor, let's marry them off, let's set them up to have a bayis them of Yisrael. We might not be making a Schwarze Chasna in that sense, that we're finding orphans and marrying them up. But what can we do to encourage Yisomim and Almanos at this time? We're before Pesach. We still have time. Let's send a card. All of us know someone who's lost their spouse. It may have been in this past year. It may have been a couple of years ago. It could have been many years ago. And they're lonely, and they're even going to be more lonely this year because of all the social distancing that's taking place. Let's reach out. Let's send a card. Thank God our mail service is still running. Let's send a card. I did this last week. I reached out to somebody that I know who lost his wife this past year, and he is beside himself. And he called me yesterday. He said, you have no idea what that card did for me. And he went on. We had a long conversation. He's an older, elderly man, and he reached out. And he said, I was so moved. I started to think, okay, who do I know fits into the category of Yisomim? People who have lost their parents, reach out to them, send them a Pesach card. Give a call, an email, something. Lift their spirits. Let them know we care. Let them know that we value them. If we can't physically marry people off, let's do our best to shower chesed on those who need it so much at this time. So again, two ideas of how we can all be performing our own Schwarze Chasanas. Number one, let's keep to the directives that all of our health professionals are advising us, and all of our national Jewish organizations, all of our poskim are advising us to follow those directives, to minimize the spread of this virus. By doing that, we're looking after the most vulnerable, and that's our own making our Schwarze Chasna, a black wedding. But also, Yasom v'almana yoded, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes a special interest in the orphans and in the widows. In the days leading up to Pesach, let's model that behavior as well. And let's emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's reach out to those who are lonely, and they're going to be even more lonely now this year. Let's reach out to them. Let them know we love them. We care about them. We're thinking of them. It'll mean so much to them. And by doing this, we will emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let me just conclude with something that we've been sharing a number of times over the last couple of weeks. We're in Chodesh Nisan, the month of Nisan. This is known as the Chodesh HaGeula, the month of redemption, because this is the month that our ancestors originally experienced such an awesome redemption of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Chazal tell us in the Gemara, B'Nisan Nigalu v'Nisan Asidin Ligael, that it was in the month of Nisan that our people experienced our first Geula, our first redemption. And it's ultimately in the month of Nisan that we will experience our ultimate redemption. If there was ever a time where we felt we needed that ultimate redemption, it certainly is now. We're living with such anxiety and such fear. We don't know what to expect. We don't know how to properly protect ourselves. We're trying so hard. We need a Geula. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu answer our tefillos. May He look at how we are looking out for, how we are caring for the most vulnerable amongst us. May He look and see the chesed that we are doing for those who really need a helping hand during this trying time. Combine that with the efforts that we're making to stay healthy and to stay strong. May Hashem put an end to this virus. May He put an end to this pandemic. Bring a refuah shalem, a complete recovery to all those who need it. Bring nechama, comfort to all those families who are mourning and going through such trauma, such torture, whether it's the loss of a loved one and those lonely shivas that they're experiencing, or whether it's staying at home while their loved one has been whisked away to the hospital and not knowing where they are. May Hashem offer nechama to everybody who needs His comfort. And may He redeem us from this situation and bring the ultimate geula with Mashiach Tzidkenu b'mehera b'yameinu. Amen. Have a Chag Kasher v'Sameach.